I will see what I can.
All right, good morning. I'm going to call our meeting to order. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Beth.
Sure. Commissioner Schlangen.
Here.
Commissioner Heinen. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Kapinski.
Here.
Commissioner Pop.
Here.
Thanks.
On to approval or amendments to our agenda. Monty, you have any changes?
We have no changes.
Move for approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve our agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. County board meetings are broadcasted live and video recorded on YouTube. Please refrain from speaking from the audience area and come to the podium so that viewers can hear you. County board observes Robert's Rules of Order for its meetings, so please obtain the board chair's consent before addressing the county board. Public comments are generally reserved for the open forum segment or public hearings. However, public comment on other agenda items may be allowed at the discretion of the board chair. As we begin today, please turn off all your cell phones or put them on vibrate. Thank you. Move on to open forum. Is there anyone here for open forum? Thank you, Beth. All right, we have a couple individuals here, just a couple of policies I'd like to read off for you. The purpose of the open forum section of the county board meeting is to allow the public input and or information to be presented to the board that does not require action by the board. Personal attacks of any kind against another person are not allowed. Campaign type presentations are not allowed. The normal time limit is 5 minutes per speaker. The time limit may be shortened or extended at the discretion of the chair. All input or information is to be addressed to the Board of Commissioners and not to members of the audience. Speaker handouts are public information. The county may make copies of such handouts for public if needed. And the chair will ensure that the open forum policy is followed. First name on the list, Joe Stepanski. If you could please come to the podium.
Oh, I thought it was just a sign-in, Scott.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Nothing on the open forum, all right.
That was
Gary
quick.
Grundle? Gary Grundle, you have anything for open forum? No. Okay. And John Bamboo? No. Oh, all right. Well, then I guess I read that. That was quick. All right, then, thank you. We'll move on. Move on to consent agenda. Items 1 through 4. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chair, I would like to pull number 3.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I would like to pull number 4.
all right.
With that, Mr. Chair, I'll move for approval of 1 and 2.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. You had 3?
I had 4.
You had 4.
I got 3.
Pop, item 3.
So I see we're going to reappoint the Regional Airport Authority. When we did this, we kind of asked that they come back and report to us now and then, the members of this, and I don't think we've seen too much of that. You know, this is could be a tax implementation on the county if this doesn't go well, and I think the county boards should have that right, that they should report at least a couple times a year, if not about 3 times. And then I was wondering about is this just a yearly deal, or do we have to, is this for another 3-year term?
It'd be for a 3-year term for Mr. Quaid and also for. Sorry, I have no solution for you. Hang on. Did you? Okay. And also for Angela Olson, 3-year term.
Okay, I just would. I would just like to make sure that it's recommended that, one of their members of the company,
Would you like me to invite them to be here?
at least once, at least a couple times a year would
Okay,
be
sure, yeah.
my thought.
Yeah. Okay. I will invite. I mean, I recall last time Brian Myers came along with Bill
Right.
Towle. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Kurt, yeah, well, he's a member.
You're going to table it, or you're going to?
No, that's fine. Do we have to do them individual, or do you wanna go?
We'll do them
So
individually.
with that, I move for approval of item number 3.
Motion second to approve consent item 3. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Number 4, Commissioner Kapinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say thank you out to the Sauk Rapids Lions Club for donating. Got a lot of clubs that donate. The Rice, Sportsman's Club, there's, like I said, there's multiple and they don't have to do this and we much appreciate it. So, I just wanted to pull it for that reason. The other thing is some of these clubs, it'd be nice to have them come in and just say hi and, you know, let us know what's going on and they're a big part of our county. That's all I have, and with that, I will move approval of consent item number 4.
Motion and second for approval of consent, agenda item number 4. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. All right, we'll move on to Land Services Director Roxanne Achman.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr.
Morning.
Chair.
Good morning.
Before you, we have ordinance 489, which is the limiting of use of cannabis in public places. As you all know, this has been on the top of everybody's list through different counties, cities, all throughout the state for the past several months. What I want to let you know is that we have sent out an invitation to this public hearing to roughly 100 individuals within the county, to include all elected and appointed officials on city councils, city administrators, managers, all of the township supervisors. So nearly 100 invitations went out to participate in this meeting, or at least watch the meeting online, or to log in and be able to participate online. So when we get to that point of the public hearing, just so you know, there may be individuals online as well that want to speak to that. Because this is such a contentious issue, we wanted our public health to be here to explain the public health concerns to the board and to everyone that may be watching this, so that there's a better understanding of why this is an ordinance that we want to have adopted. Jacqueline, come up.
Great. Thank you, Roxanne, for the partnership as well. Okay, so Monty, would you be able to share this to the folks online? I'm not sure, I don't want to disconnect us on accident or anything.
Okay. Let's see here. It goes like this, is you share your screen. Roxanne, you're much better at this than I am, because you do this all the time. Am I doing this right? She wants to share something.
I think, yeah. Yeah,
Is
I
it,
think
is
so.
it entire screen or window?
I believe window.
Okay, thank you.
Older one.
Do you have it up? Is it?
It's minimized on the.
For sure.
Yeah, this is, they've changed this so much. I guess if you do entire screen.
Pierce. Yep, paste.
Open up your presentation, you should be fine. There you go.
It appears that it's up there, doesn't it? Okay.
There we go.
Okay, well, good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Thanks for your patience while we figured that out. So shortly you'll receive a presentation from our community health specialists, Jenny Leeser and Mariah Klein. And within this presentation, you're going to hear just a brief overview of the impacts of cannabis on community health. In addition, our presentation will focus largely on youth impacts from cannabis, which we'll hear from one of our community partners, Jenny Kenning, and who will be introduced during the presentation as well. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Mariah and Jenny for the presentation.
Good morning, board.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so first we're just gonna start off by talking about cannabis and what that is. So cannabis is a plant. It produces over 500 different chemicals, and 100 of those being cannabinoids, which are chemical compounds that produce a range of physical and mental effects. The two most common cannabinoids in cannabis are CBD and THC. CBD is non-psychoactive, and THC is a psychoactive one, the one that's addicting and creates a high. Federal law divides the cannabis plants into two broad categories. One is hemp and one is marijuana. And so hemp is are plants that have less than a 0.3% THC, and then marijuana is above that. So usually marijuana has higher THC and less CBD in those plants. The two most common species of cannabis plants are cannabis sativa and indica. There's multiple different strains of plants as well, but in each plant kind of has their own effects on how they affect people. Cannabis has changed from years past to what it looks like today, specifically marijuana when you're looking at the THC concentration. And so back in the 80s and 90s, it was about 4%, and now it's about 12 to 15%. And that's specifically talking about marijuana that's smoked. There's lots of different ways that people consume marijuana. So they also, extract oils and dabs is what they call it, or waxes from the plants. And so when they use those, the concentration of THC in those products can be upwards of 50 to 90% THC, so much higher than just the smoking tobacco, or I'm sorry, the smoking cannabis that traditionally has been used.
Morning, board.
Morning.
There are several different health effects that are linked and associated with cannabis use, and those include depression, anxiety, suicide planning, and psychotic episodes. And research has shown that people who use marijuana use actually have some different outcomes. So they have problems with their relationships, they have worse educational outcomes, lower career achievement, as well as reduced life satisfaction overall. And then additionally, marijuana use during pregnancy can also have impacts on the baby. And what that includes is fetal growth restriction, premature birth or stillbirth, as well as problems with brain development, such as resulting in hyperactivity and poor cognitive function. Something else to note is that THC and other chemicals from marijuana can actually be passed from the baby through the mother's breast milk. So that can further impact a child's development. And then just something I wanted to point out, this is a statement from the CDC on secondhand smoke caused from marijuana. There are still additional studies being performed. However, the CDC states that secondhand marijuana smoke contains many of the same toxic and cancer-causing chemicals found in tobacco smoke and contains some of the chemicals in higher amounts. Secondhand marijuana smoke also contains THC, which is a psychoactive component of cannabis. And recent studies have found strong associations between reports of having somebody in the home who uses marijuana and then the children having detectable levels of THC from that marijuana use by the parent, caregiver, or other adult that's in the home. So more research is needed to understand what that link is, but just wanted to note this statement from the CDC. And now I'm going to introduce Jennifer Kenning, who's the Student Assistance Coordinator from Sauk Rapids Rice School District, and she's going to talk about youth impacts and what she's seeing in the school.
Good morning.
Morning.
So my name is Jennifer Kenning. I'm a licensed alcohol drug counselor. I've worked in the field of addiction for 25 years, and in the last 12 years, I've had the privilege of working in the Sauk Rapids Rice School District and working with the youth there. So we just heard a little bit about some of the effects, and thank you. And I want to talk a little bit about what some of the information with youth and what I'm seeing with youth in the school district. So when it comes to young people using substances, using cannabis, we see a higher rate of addiction. So when young people under the age of 18 choose to use cannabis, marijuana, 1 in 6 of them are going to struggle with addiction going forward. And that's a lot higher of a rate than we see when people wait till after the age of 18, and that rate of addiction is about 1 in 10. And that has to do with the developing brain of young people. Additionally, we see over long term, we can see actually an IQ loss. So they, in New Zealand, they did a study, and the study came out in 2021 where they followed marijuana use beginning in youth and then going forward into adulthood, and they found that there was actually a decrease in an IQ level, and that can be up to 8 points, and that is irreversible. So those are IQ points that will not come back or will not improve even once someone does stop using. The next couple slides we're going to look at have to do with the Minnesota Student Survey, which is a survey given in Minnesota every 3 years to school districts. And the information that we'll be looking at is Benton County. So that would include both the Foley School District and the Sauk Rapids Rice School District. So the first slide here shows Benton County ninth graders. And along the bottom, we see the 2013, 16, 19, and then the 2022 data. These are ninth graders that acknowledged marijuana use in the previous year, okay? Now, we look at that most recent one in 2022, about 8% of Benton County ninth graders are acknowledging use in the previous year, which equals about 1 in 13. So 1 in 13 ninth graders. Comparing that to the 11th graders, same question, same years it was given, but that 2022 number is quite a bit higher. It's about 3 times higher for our 11th graders at about 22%, which again would be about 1 in 5. So that is quite an increase. The other thing I want to point out about this slide is that we do see, previous to the 2022 number, a little bit of a decrease, and in Benton County at that time, we did see an increase in tobacco and nicotine use in our young people, so we kind of are correlating that to why it went down, but now, of course, it has gone up significantly. And that trend is something that I'm seeing in our school district as well. Like I said, I've been in there for 12 years. 12 years ago, I did see and I worked with some young people who were struggling with or got in trouble with THC or marijuana use, but that is very different than what I'm seeing now, which is a huge increase in use. I've seen a huge increase in drug tests that are failed drug tests with THC. I've seen it like last year. I keep really good data about what I'm seeing and what I'm working with young people. Last year I had a huge increase in kids that are going to treatment for marijuana abuse. And then finally, this slide talks again about, the Minnesota Student Survey data, perceived risk of use. So this is a really important concept to understand. It's when kids believe something is not harmful, that behavior is likely to be a greater behavior. So in 2022, 38% of Benton County 11th graders thought that there was no risk involved with using marijuana weekly, and that compared to 2013, in the parentheses, you'll see that number was 18%. So that number has gone up significantly. And again, when young people are believing that there's no risk with something, we see that behavior increase. So at the bottom of this slide, is that part of it? Maybe not. So between 2013 and 2022, the perception of no risk associated with marijuana use between the 9th and the 11th grade doubled. And again, that's a significant attitude shift. And it is reflected in what I see in the schools firsthand. So like I said, I've seen an alarming increase in youth marijuana use. And so that is why I'm requesting with everyone here the limit of cannabis use in public places that will help protect our young people in Benton County. It will limit exposure to marijuana, and it will protect their physical and mental health. Thank you.
All right, and that concludes our presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So staff has been working with and in communication with a number of the surrounding counties to find out what their approach was and what seems to be the direction that they've wanted to go. Since August, when we first came forward with an ordinance, a number of counties have adopted a public use ordinance to include Stearns County has adopted an ordinance, and they include all jurisdictions except for they do allow for cities to supersede that ordinance if they choose to. Wright County has a border-to-border approach, and they had support from all of the cities within their jurisdiction, so that's why they were able to move forward with that approach. And Sherburne County adopted an ordinance just 2 weeks ago that includes Public Health Authority and extends jurisdiction to all cities and towns entirely within its boundaries. So that excluded St. Cloud and Princeton, and then they also added that cities with 25,000 or more population were also excluded. So that excluded Elk River, and Elk River did already have a public use ordinance in place. So those are the counties. We've got St. Cloud had passed an ordinance early on to prohibit the use of cannabis in city parks or public parking lots adjacent to the city parks. Sartell passed a very similar public use ordinance to St. Cloud, and then Sartell had passed a resolution to only enforce what is outlined in state law. So if
Did you mean Sauk Rapids? I think we said
what?
Sartell.
Excuse me, Sauk Rapids.
Yeah.
Sorry. So those are the cities that have adopted their own public use ordinances or passed a resolution. As you know, jurisdiction has been kind of one of the biggest topics and points of contention on how do we enforce this ordinance. And so after multiple discussions on how that would look, I think it was discussed that to bring forward an ordinance that is only let me read this verbatim, but it is the unincorporated area of the county, county leased and owned property, and county parks. So that would exclude all of our cities. Now, if the cities wanted to enforce the same ordinance as the county, should this be adopted, we would gladly send that ordinance to them to amend so that it fit their city. I do know that the city of Foley has already requested that our ordinance be sent to them should it be passed today. The penalty for violation of the ordinance would be a petty misdemeanor, and this is consistent with state statute. The sheriff's office has spoken with court administration, who determined that it would be a $50 fine for the first offense within a year, a $150 fine for the second offense within a year, and a $300 fine for 3 or more offenses within the same 12 months. Additionally, this ordinance does include restricting vaping or smoking of regulated products where the smoke, aerosol, or vapor would be inhaled by a minor.
All right, any other staff reports before we move into a public hearing? Any other staff? All right, thank you, Roxanne. Again, this is a public hearing for ordinance number 49, limiting the use of cannabis in public places. If there's anybody that would like to speak to the board about that, if you could please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Joe Skapansky, Malick Township. I guess I need clarification, is this just for the smoking and the vaping? Because there's a lot of other products out there, gummies, any kind of cannabis that can be taken, internally without the smoke involved, where it can pass on to, say, children that are in the area. So that's what I need clarification, if it's just for the smoking and the vaping versus the gummies and so on.
All right, thank you, Joe. Michelle, could I maybe have you address that, please?
Yes. It does include all cannabinoid products, so it could be gummies, it could be anything that can be consumed on public property.
Anyone else in the public hearing that'd like to speak to the board about this ordinance? Please get your name and address for the record.
Melissa Pribble, 1520 County Road 39 in Monticello.
Thank you.
Good morning, board, and everyone. Thank you for the platform to continue conversations that drive community health in our communities. My name is Melissa Pribble, and I'm a community health nurse for Centricare. I'm also a member of several community coalitions for substance use prevention. I belong to SUPS Coalition in Sherburne County, MEDA in Wright County, Big Lake Substance Use Prevention Coalition for Big Lake Schools, as well as a member of the Opioid Settlement Advisory Council in Wright County. Today, I want to share with you some of the patterns that we continue to see on the healthcare side that are impacting our communities and show no signs of slowing as we look at cannabis use and other substances. Across our healthcare system, Many healthcare providers are getting candid in the conversations that they're having with their patients. There's lack of perceived harm, as we've heard this morning, and providers are seeing a layering effect linked to mental health and well-being, noncompliance in medication management, as well as lack of literacy when it comes to engagement around spaces of harm reduction. In asking our provider groups across the healthcare system, especially in our central Minnesota area, providers are hearing a number of things from patients on why they specifically are using cannabis. They include things like, I want to try it, I'm curious. It's all natural, it doesn't have as many risks compared to other substances. I want to get high to feel good. I use it to cope with my anxiety and depression. I'm bored, my friends are doing it. And in many cases, the problems for many providers is that there are so many substances that youth are engaging in which counteract current medications, show differences in behavior, and can affect new medication protocols to begin as needed. This concern is very overwhelming for providers and to ensure that their patients are safe. There's much confusion across our communities that cannabis is all natural and there's no ill health effects. It also does not help there's so much misinformation around this topic. Providers want to objectively provide accurate health information, but also need to have a space where we can come together to have open and honest conversation, especially since we're seeing a number of patients, especially our youth, disclosing high usage. There are a lot of patterns linked to mental health, high-risk behavior, and unintentional exposure to cannabis in higher-risk spaces such as our urgency centers and ERs. There are many cases where youth are engaged in using vapes and are unaware of the substances that they may even be using. I just want to share a small scope into the data that we are seeing around overdoses and exposure to cannabis linked to harm. In our St. Cloud area, we have seen over the last year a 16% increase in pediatric patients disclosing that they use cannabis 2 times a week. And of those, 6% have been diagnosed with a use disorder specific to cannabis. That means it's the inability to stop using even though it's causing health or social issues. We have seen more than a dozen cases in the last 6 months alone with unintended exposure coming to the emergency department. According to the CDC, we know that nationwide, nearly 20% of youth who approach an ER urgency center under age 12 report that using cannabis back in 2021. 20% under age 12 that come into our ERs and urgency centers report using cannabis. And we didn't even see that fluctuate during the pandemic. The argument is that alcohol or pharmaceuticals have brought many to the ER when it comes to overdosing, right? And no one has died from cannabis. But the truth is that many are overdosing on cannabis. Specifically, more patients between the age of 15 and 24 are coming to the emergency room for overdosing on cannabis with symptoms such as impending doom, anxiety, panic attacks, and most commonly, trouble breathing and tightness in the chest. The difficult part in many of these cases is that there's not much we can do immediately, and then many of those patients then decline any type of medical treatment after the initial testing is done. There is also a lack of knowledge when it comes to the effects of cannabis use that is clear across our communities. There are many effects in midlife and long-term cannabis use, especially affecting our youth who are unaware or have a lack of perceived harm. There's been a variety of academic research over the last decade on aligning long-term health effects for those who use cannabis regularly, which is considered at least 2 times weekly in the long term. Studies are now suggesting that long-term use from the time of youth and on results in deficits in learning, processing speed, and frequently results in cognitive impairment and cognitive links such as learning, developing, and forming memories. Other outcomes include but are not limited to memory and attention problems, interdependence of other drugs and substances, harm to brain health, especially in developing years, increased and more complex mental health issues, impaired driving, and development of use disorders. In closing, CentraCare is committed to helping build healthier communities and has aligned much of our community-facing work around harm reduction. We want to be a partner and support what creates health in all of our communities. With the legalization of cannabis, we need to ensure appropriate information is shared and that policies are put in place to protect our youth. We encourage you to adopt practices to help reduce exposure that leads to increased use at a young age. Cannabis use and public youth exposure to cannabis at parks and recreational facilities do not align with our mission to create healthy and flourishing communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak during the public hearing?
John Bembo, Mayo Lake Township.
Morning, John.
My address is 10210 45th Avenue Northeast, Sauk Rapids, Maine. First thing I want to know is why are the fines for the illegal use of cannabis so small? That's not going to really stop anybody from using it illegally wherever. And can a county set its own fine amounts or not? And next off, this is definitely going to increase the impaired driving statistics. I think we all know that. So sheriff's going to be pretty busy, I think, in Benton County and everywhere else.
Thank you, John. Michelle, could you maybe address those two questions?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Sheriff Troy Heck and I did have a discussion about the fine schedule. A lot of counties just put in it's a petty misdemeanor. You can have a fine up to $300. To be consistent with what we have for our tobacco ordinance, we do have different grades and levels of offenses and fines. So you would have within your discretion, if you wanted to change that fine schedule, you certainly could. And we can go forward, with that today.
I assume we could change that schedule probably at any time with an amendment to the ordinance?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else during the public hearing that would like to speak on the cannabis ordinance? Anyone else? Is there anyone online? I'm just looking through the names here. Anyone online that would like to speak during the public hearing? All right, final call for anyone that would like to speak on the ordinance. Cannabis. All right, our public hearing is closed. Are there any emails, letters, or other communications to be read into the record?
I have not received any. I don't know if.
All right, I did receive one, and since I just received one email, I will read it into the record. I did receive this yesterday. Scott, I just wanted to pass my thoughts and concerns about people smoking marijuana in public, as I know you're meeting on this issue tomorrow. I'd like to ask that you ban smoking of marijuana in all public parks and public spaces, and here's why. I know the new Minnesota state law just passed, and I brought my wife and nephews to the Minnesota State Fair. We went there intending to have a great fun-filled day. What really happened was we were greeted around every corner with a pungent, skunky smell of people smoking and vaping marijuana. Made my stomach turn as I tried to enjoy my cheese curds and lemonade. Let me give you another example. In my job, I was covering for a fellow employee who was out on vacation. This job covers Sauk Rapids, Waite Park, St. Cloud, and Sartell. I can't tell you the number of people who were sitting in the bus shelter smoking marijuana in the presence of little kids also, which also made my stomach turn. Public transportation is for all, and people, they should be able to use the bus without having to smell marijuana. I also feel that public spaces, including parks, should remain marijuana and smoke-free. I think everyone should have the opportunity to enjoy all these things that are tax dollars provided marijuana smoke-free. I'd like to ask you to make ordinances making it illegal to use marijuana in any public space. Thank you. Mitch Litvin, resident of Sauk Rapids and St. George Township. Any other letters or comments from government entities? Was there any official action taken by any townships or that you're aware of?
No.
All right. County Board will now have time for staff for discussion, questions. Mind the audience, the public hearing is. Commissioner Schwann?
I have questions. You mentioned in hemp plants, like it has in the marijuana plants.
By federal definition, hemp plants have to be less than 0.3% THC, and that's they're included in the Farm Bill as such. So no, those, if they are above that, then they're no longer considered hemp plants.
Also, with CBD, with those that, if they don't have the THC, are you limiting the use of the CBD?
As far as the ordinance goes, it's cannabis, covers cannabis products completely. So it doesn't differentiate what percentage of THC or percentage of CBD are in those products.
Okay, well, if you have a CBD product, okay, so it came from hemp, so then you're considering it's got some of the THC in it?
I'll let Michelle speak. Thank you.
All right, so the scope of this ordinance would cover hemp-derived consumer products that you can consume. It would also, low-potency hemp edibles would also be included. So the CBD products that have already been legalized wouldn't necessarily be within the scope of this.
right, members, any other questions, or we're gonna look for a motion here?
Mr. Chair? I will say we spent, I thank the health department of Benton County for getting this all together, Roxanne. Spent a lot of time dealing with this, and it went from one direction to another direction to, here's where we're at today. The one thing I will say, I think this is a moving target, and it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And I can support this motion, but with living in Sauk Rapids and the other cities have the ability to do their own policies, ordinances, everything like that. I just want to make it known that there is a chance that we could bring this back and make a over-encompassing county-wide public health policy. So I encourage everybody to do the right thing, and let's make our community.
All right, you did hear discussion from the public.
We're gonna have to shut the mics off for a moment. Yeah.
Speak loudly, commissioners.
We're gonna leave the mics off for the moment.
Okay.
The question would be for law enforcement, if there was criminal acts that were committed, they're still going to be proceeding with that and not just a fine?
Sheriff Heck or Michelle, would you like to address that?
Troy, are you able to hear us?
Mic system off, Troy cannot hear us.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Michelle.
By statute, it's simply a petty misdemeanor. So a petty misdemeanor is not technically a crime. So we don't have the ability to make it a misdemeanor at this time. It's a petty misdemeanor. Our options are fines. So that's our limitation. We get to go up to $300, and if in the future that petty misdemeanor fine is increased, then at that point we could increase that fine, but we are limited by our statute.
But if somebody committed a crime while they were using it,
Yep, so I think the overarching crime that they're committing they'll be convicted of the DWI. They won't necessarily focus on the open bottle charge.
Mics off.
That answer your question, Commissioner Sloan?
yeah, I'm assuming they're still going to be proceeding with fines.
Yes, yes, yep.
Commissioner Heinen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I do thank the public though for putting this ordinance together. I too, in my district, is the other half of Sauk Rapids. I have 14 parks in my district.
He's the guilty.
Technology is, I love technology, but there's time we need to upgrade technology.
Get your mic to that.
Instead of having to deal with this. So I have 14 parks alone in my district. 3 of them are large. One's right across from the elementary school, and the other ones are small ones. Small ones as they only have a swing set and 2 benches. My opinion, if it'd be up to me, I would do border to border, all the way across the county. You know, people in my district are telling me and asking me, can we do this? And I'm saying, yes, we can, but we're gonna leave it up to the city to choose what kind of ordinance they want. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, if it was up to me, I would do border to border and not give the city the opportunity.
Okay, any other comments, commissioners? Commissioner Pop?
I pretty much agree with Commissioner Heinen. I have 2 of the largest parks in my district that we have in the county. And I would totally be inclined to increase the fine rate. I think that, the penny misdemeanor at $50 is nothing these days, or $30, whatever it was. So I'd be inclined to that. And I think we're at a point in time where we decided we weren't gonna do border to border, and be a little tough to change that right now.
Okay, Commissioner Kapinski?
Mr. Chair, on the comments between Commissioner Pop and Mr. Heinen here, I too would like to go border to border, but at this point, I think we let the cities do the best they can, and if we have to do it coming up, then we move that forward. With the fines, I too believe that they're very small, and I think we need to have maybe a committee of the whole and talk about that.
Well, you guys could today have that little bit of discussion and change it so we don't have to continue the public hearing.
Michelle, what is our maximum?
Our maximum is 300.
Okay, so hypothetically, you could come right out of the gate with a $300 fine.
Correct.
Okay?
Mr. Chair? Oh, go
Commissioner
ahead.
Schlangen, go ahead.
My other question would be can we ban them from being in the public parks if this is a repeated use?
Yeah. Yes, you
You mean
can.
the individual?
Right.
I mean, they should have to leave if they're using regardless. So I mean, if they go back, we'll have the same remedy essentially, regardless of whether or not we trespass them. I believe that would be the correct terminology, but.
Commissioner Heinen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this on? I agree with the fine. Excuse me. I agree with going up to $300 worth of fine. You know, but I am still disappointed that we're gonna let other cities try to make their decision moving forward. You know, the parks are designed for everybody. I get that. I understand that. But at the end of the day, being involved with public health like I am, it's my mic.
We knew that.
You know, the parks are also designed for families out there and the kids playing on these swing sets. You know, everybody's invested a lot of money in these parks and are gonna keep investing money in those parks. I guess the question I have to Michelle is, if we pass this ordinance that we have in front of us today, at what point in time can we come back and change the ordinance? Is this something we can do in 6 months or a year, or is there a set time frame?
You could do it next week.
Okay, so there's no set time frame.
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Pop?
So this is more or less targeted towards the Sauk Rapids Commissioners. Do you think the city will come back and see it our way eventually, or do we need to force their hand a little bit?
I cannot speak on behalf of the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'm going to comment on that a little bit. I can certainly respect and understand your thought process on this, Commissioner Heinen. I think I was probably the one that felt the strongest that this should be a city decision countywide. I realize Sauk Rapids was probably the only city at the time that didn't want to have a border-to-border thing. From my opinion, I still feel that way. I think the cities, the local as much possible can make those decisions. If they fall on their face, I think we review it in 6 months or 12 months and we talk about it again.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't know, I'm still open to the discussion about fines. So if that's something you're interested in, I agree with Michelle. Let's take care of it today.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Kapinski.
Following up on the city comment, I think a lot of people are waiting to see what counties do. You know, and then they'll move forward with their own at that point. So I think giving the cities the opportunity to do what's best for their city and their residents is the right thing to do. We come back in 6 months to a year and re-look at it, that's fine. I do also believe with the small fines that are out there, this could become a bigger problem rather than if we go to the max right away at $300. I think we're gonna cut some of these issues down in half because $300 hits a lot more than what's current, so.
All right, Commissioner
So
Pop.
this question is probably from Michelle. So Michelle, if the county goes to $300, does that mean if you're cited in the city of Sauk Rapids, you'll automatically be 300?
So this won't encompass Sauk Rapids, this will only encompass the towns.
jurisdictions that-
And the county parks and county
Okay.
property.
Unincorporated areas.
Unincorporated areas. Yep, so.
Okay.
Yes, if we switch the language to it's a $300 fine for every offense, you would be able to do that, and then anytime a ticket was issued, then at that point it would be a $300 fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Jeff, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I see you're here from the city of Foley. Any comment on that, as far as the fines?
Jeff Gondek, 55 Carpenter Street, City of Foley. The council is looking for direction. We are, I would say we are waiting. I don't want to, my personal belief in this, because I'm not speaking for the council, I'm just here for
Understand, yeah.
observation. Commissioner Heinen, I do understand border to border would be really easy. Commissioner Gopinski, I understand that you will leave it up to the city. After listening to all the comments today, this is a plague, let's face it. And we don't want our children to go down this aisle. So keeping it out of city parks, county parks is a step in the right direction. The fine, definitely. If you're gonna do it, we've seen in the past where people have circumvented laws with a $300 fine. Let's stop the plague right away. Myself, and this might be, and I'm speaking on myself as a council member, I would like to see it banned from city parks, because after all, it's a family-orientated place. With that in mind, I don't want to have the negative atmosphere, especially in a city park where everybody can enjoy it. I'm open to questions, commissioners.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted your opinion on it. Thank you, since I saw you here. Thank you. All right, members, any other thoughts? You've heard some discussion about fines. You've heard the discussion about keeping the ordinance that's in front of us versus a border to border. So, looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance that's before us, but I'd like to raise the fines to $300.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right, a motion and a second on keeping the existing ordinance that's presented to us, but including changing the fines to $300. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Buttons on the bottom.
Mr. Chair. I agree to some extent with this ordinance, but I'm gonna vote against it because I want border to border. But I am in full compliance with the $300 fine.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for your presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for members of the public. Roxanne, maybe we'll just give them a couple seconds here to vacate the room and we'll move on to your next item.
Thanks, Melissa.
So that meeting's on.
Check, check. You hear me?
No.
Test. You hear me now?
Nope.
Test nest. This microphone's a piece of junk. This microphone's
I
a piece
heard
of
that.
junk.
No, that one we heard.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
Oh, I forgot to click my heels together 3 times. That was the problem.
That's it.
Hello, hello.
Good. Get it
No,
on.
nothing.
Yeah, no one.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to our
Thanks,
next
Jim.
item, discussion on request by Mapping Prejudice. Roxanne.
All right. The Recorder's Office was approached by a group affiliated with several local educational institutions who are working with a group called Mapping Prejudice at the University of Minnesota. And so the project that they are working on is they are trying to identify prejudice covenants or racial covenants that have been placed on deeds within counties. And so they have started working with a number of the counties in Minneapolis area in the Twin Cities area, and they're finding that there used to be a number of racial covenants placed on the deeds. I did provide you with a copy of a deed that is in Benton County that does show that Benton County does have deeds out there with racial covenants that were in place. This one in particular dates back to 1941. The whole idea is more of a history project to identify that the scale of these racial or prejudice covenants. The group is not looking to remove them. It's simply a project that they're working on to identify these properties and how far spread that is. So they would simply identify them by going through all of our records. We would enter into a memorandum of understanding so that they would have access to the property deeds. And then they'd identify them, and they would provide us with that information, but they're not going to seek out these individuals to have those changed. Now, if somebody were to find out that there was a racial covenant on their property, we could point them in the right direction to work with a company in removing that from the deeds, but we are not, and they are not actually forcing anyone to remove those. So it's more of an educational project in that respect. There would be no cost to the county for something like this. Sherburne County did just pass a resolution and are moving forward with this project. I know Stearns County, they did not, but I think there was some misunderstanding that there would be, as part of this project, that there would be costs waived. There is no cost incurred, so there's nothing that we would be waiving. Down the road, if we wanted to discuss waiving the fees, if somebody wanted to remove those, we could do that, but that's not part of this request.
All right. Roxanne, just for clarification, it is available to existing deed holders now that if they find that on their deed, they could request to get that removed and pay for that to be recorded? They
could.
Okay.
Yep, but most of these they ended up dropping that off of deeds, so you don't see it now. As the properties transferred, they would end up dropping off that racial covenant because it became illegal in 1953. But it is documented that they found that those have carried on up to the 1980s. Most of these occur between 1900 and 1970, but like I said, most of them have dropped off by 1980s.
All right, and for sake of discussion, my personal feeling on this is I don't believe this is an arena we should be getting into, and I'm going to move to table this indefinitely.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion second to table indefinitely. All those in favor?
Aye.
No discussion on the table.
Oh, that's right.
No discussion on the table.
That's right.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. Tabled indefinitely. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the Human Services Board. I'll turn it over to Commissioner.
Call to order the Human Services Board. I'm going to talk really loud if I can. Approve or amend the agenda. Bob, you have anything to add?
No changes.
Motion to approve the agenda is presented, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What would we like to do with them?
Move approval.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Bob, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Nothing at all today?
Field any questions, otherwise I have
Questions
nothing.
for Bob? Thank you. At that point in time, we're adjourned at 9:53, and I'll turn it back over to the board chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Heinen. All right, we'll move into considering the Marsh and McLennan Agency recommendation for employee health insurance funding premium rates for 24
Mr.
Monty.
Amy Dietrich from MMA is with us, and I am going to share screen so Amy can do her presentation. She's with us on GoTo. Give me just a second, Amy, and we will make you the presenter. Okay, you should see it pop up on your screen now, or you can be the presenter.
All right, let me see if I can get this figured out here.
Join the club.
My I might have to. I am having a challenge trying to get the right screen to share here. So let me see if I can do this. Technology is always wonderful when it works correctly. Huh.
I think you've said that before.
All right.
We're
Now,
not-
I think I've
Yeah.
got it.
There we go. We see it. Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Perfect. Good morning,
Good morning.
Commissioners and other members. Today I am going to present to you what a recommendation is for the funding of the self-funded plan for Benton County. We've got some optimistic news going forward, and then we've also got some corrective action that we still need to take place. So first of all, on the good news, we are actually seeing a reduction in the cost on a per member per month basis. When we look at claim costs through August, which is what we're gonna be looking at here when we're making this recommendation on funding for 2024, we're actually seeing a drop in cost on a per member per month basis of just about 2%. That is a very good trend going forward. However, we're still looking at a funding deficit, in particular with the reserves. And as you can look here, it's highlighted on the bottom line where it says year-to-date reserve estimate. At the end of January, we had about $168,000 in the self-funded reserve. We are projected to add about $500,000 by the end of the year. Now, that is a good positive direction, but Benton County has a policy that we need that to be at about 6 months. Reserve, and so we need to look at building that back. And what we've done is we've asked our underwriting team to put together a 3-year projection, because to add it all back in the terms of 1 year would be an extremely costly addition. We are projecting we want to be a little over $2 million by 2026 to get us to our 6-month reserve. So our recommendation is to do a 10% funding for 2024, and then that would create about an 8% in 2025 and potentially a 10% in 2026. Now, obviously, this is all very fluid. It could change. If claims come in better than what our projection is, then we would adjust 2025 and 2026. These are just estimates. We are not saying this is what a 3-year cost would look like. This is just to give the board and also the insurance committee kind of a potential guideline of what it could look like. If through the end of 2023, we end up with more than that projected $500,000 gain, again, that would put us better ahead for 2025, and we would look at it again. So our recommendation going forward, or for 2024, is a 10% increase to the funding rates for the self-funded plan. Another item that is impacting Benton, and this is the first year that this has impacted Benton, the HSA plans are governed by the IRS. The IRS sets certain limits on what minimum deductibles can be, what people can fund into the HSA. And last year they had increased it. It was $2,800 and it increased to $3,000. This year it is increasing from $3,000 to $3,200. This is the first time it has impacted the Benton County HSA plan. Previous to that, the deductible levels were lower than the Benton County plan. So in order to have the plan have the same benefits or operate in the same way as it did in 2023, we need to move the single deductible to $3,200. We will keep the family deductible at $6,000. The IRS historically has only changed these numbers every other year. However, the last 2 years, we have seen them adjusted annually. We do not know yet if it will get adjusted again for the 2025 year, but that will be something we will look at as we move forward. That concludes the recommendations for the 2024 plan year. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to address those.
Thank you, Amy. Members, any questions?
Can I ask, Amy, could you tell us about the consequences of not going with the $3,200 HSA deductible?
Sure. What it would do is it would mean that the plan would no longer allow for what's called an embedded deductible. So let's say currently right now, if I'm a family of 4 and I'm on the HSA plan, if my spouse has significant medical expenses, my spouse's total costs would stop at $3,000. Going forward into 2024, if we do not make that change to $3,200, basically that individual protection within the family plan goes away. So now my spouse could pay all the way up to $6,000. There would not be that stop at that individual level. It would be the whole family together would still need to make that $6,000, but oftentimes what we see in a family contract is there may be one person that has high medical costs. And so that could significantly impact your families of no longer that one individual stopping at $3,000 and having to go all the way up to the $6,000 family maximum.
Wow. All right.
So that embedded feature is important.
Thank you, Amy. Any other questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Heinen?
Mr. Chair. Monty, so we settled all of our union negotiations. What do we have to do now for this change?
Sure. My opinion, Mr. Chair, is that we're simply following what the IRS tells us that we must do in order to avoid dire consequences of not doing that.
Right.
So I don't believe this is a matter of negotiations or what have you. As Amy told us, it's changed in the past, and it did not trigger negotiations or changes to our collective bargaining agreements. I don't think it would in this instance as well. And again, just practically speaking, as she illustrated, the consequences are pretty severe if we don't follow what the IRS says we should do. So,
anyone else? Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Amy. Members, what are your wishes?
So we're asking, Mr. Chair, is the board to adopt the funding recommendation from Marcia McClellan, which I believe, as Amy said, is the 10% funding increase over 2023 for 24.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to increase that funding to 10% for 2024 as presented. Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Jackie, would you like to introduce the next item?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Jackie.
We have completed our 2022 audited financial statements, and here to present them is Kristen from Clifton Larson Allen.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners.
How are you
Mr.
today?
Chair. I'm good.
Good.
Like Jackie said, my name is Kristen Hool. I am with Clifton Larson Allen. I am the signing director on the audit, and I also brought with me my in-charge, Eric Fedsrud. He is observing today. Okay. So, on the agenda, just required communications, internal control, then Minnesota legal compliance and federal single audit items, followed by financial results, and then wrap it up with key issues and a summary. So we are required by audit standards to communicate certain items with governance. So you should have been issued a 6-page stapled letter. This is boilerplate, doesn't change very much year to year. A couple things to note is on page 1, it does state that GASB 87, or Governmental Accounting Standards Board, statement number 87 leases was implemented. That was a pretty big standard this year. It also talks about what accounting estimates went into the audit, that there were no difficulties encountered in performing the audit, and no disagreements with management. So those were kind of the key items. If you ever have questions, though, definitely let me know. Okay, and then the other item to note here is that you were issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the audit for 2022, and that is the best you can get. So in terms of internal control, we are required to look at the controls in place around the county each year. So there are two types of control deficiencies that we are required to report on in writing. The first type is material weakness. So that's the more severe of the two, just saying that a material misstatement could happen and go undetected for a period of time. So there were two items that fell into this bucket. These are the same two as last year, very common for entities your size. The first is audit adjustments. So during the course of the audit, we adjusted various items, many of the new GASB standards for OPEB, pensions, GASB 87, any accruals that were missed, things of that nature. And then the other bullet here is the financial reporting process. And this basically means that CLA drafts the financials for you. Management still reviews, takes responsibility before they are issued, but we do help prep them. Any questions on those two? And then the other bucket that is required to be in writing would be significant deficiencies. So still important enough to be in writing and come to governance, but less severe than a material weakness. So the same as last year as well, and that was segregation of duties. Just that there are departments within the county that don't have proper segregation just due to the size and the cost benefit. It's just not beneficial to hire enough people to get rid of this item. So going into Minnesota legal compliance and the federal single audit, so for Minnesota legal compliance, we are required by the state auditor's office to look at about 25 pages of statutes. They range from contracting and bidding, cash and investments, disbursements, things of that nature. So there were two items here. The first is the same as last year. So the ditches did have cash deficit balances. So 13 of the 13 active ditches did have them. Very common across the state that we see this as well. You could get rid of it if you wanted to start borrowing between funds just to make the finding go away, but then come 1/1, you would probably transfer back and have them back to negative, which is a lot of administrative burden, and most counties choose not to do that. And then the other item here is that there was 1 out of 40 invoices we tested that were not paid timely, so you are required to pay all invoices within 35 days. So one just slipped through the cracks.
Kristen, while you're on that, if I could have a clarification. So what if we disagree with an invoice?
Just note it.
Okay,
So as long as there's disagreement and it's noted when we come in, that is just fine.
Okay.
So if it's, we look at a stamp, or if there's no stamp of when it's received, we look at the invoice date. But if there is dispute on it, as long as someone, writes on it and notes what's going on, that is just fine.
Okay, thank you.
But we need that documentation. Okay. And then for the single audit, so since you did spend over $750,000, we are required to test federal programs. Since you are not low risk, then we had to test 40% of your total federal expenditures. So that resulted in 3 major programs this year: medical assistance, or MA, child support enforcement, and then the state and local fiscal recovery funds, or ARPA, as you know it. So there were no material weaknesses, and there was one significant deficiency, and that was in the ARPA program around procurement, suspension, and debarment. So there were 2 things in this finding. So there were 2 contracts, and in the procurement side, one of the 2 was not documented on the procurement method used. So whatever, if it's sole source or if you're going out for bid, things of that nature, it has to be documented. So it was deemed to be a sole source, but there just wasn't the documentation. And then for suspension and debarment, that is where it has to be in the contract, or the sam.gov website has to be checked to make sure the vendor isn't debarred per federal guidelines. And the sam.gov was checked after entering the contract. So it's required that it's before you enter the contract in case there is something wrong with that vendor. And then we did resolve one of the human service findings from last year. It was around TANF, and there was a lack of case file review. So that was resolved. Any questions on the items noted before we move into the financial?
Mr. Chair. Chris, was the procurement issue surrounding the selection of Finley Engineering?
Yes.
Yeah, as our consultant, back during those early days of ARPA and broadband and.
We were running and not walking.
That's right. And look where it got us.
Yeah.
Mr. Kapinski.
That's it. That was, I was checking on.
On that?
Yeah, how negatively does that affect us? Does that get reported to the federal government?
It does. I've never seen where they come back. I mean, I've seen material weaknesses in programs and they don't ever,
So the Department of Treasury doesn't come back with their hand out and say, give us our money back?
they should not.
Okay.
I can't for sure say that, but I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Forgiveness.
And I will say
Ask
that
for it.
suspension and barment procurement has been a really big common theme this year across audits, across counties. We saw in ARPA especially, and then also some counties had to have SNAP tested and it applied to that one too. So
What is
people
that?
are supplemental nutrition assistance programs, food stamps. So that one procurement applies to as well, and it was very common this year seeing it. So just to make sure you're always following the procurement policy. Okay. So on to the financial results. So this first chart here shows all of your governmental funds, and it shows the months of expenditures and unrestricted fund balance. So that is your committed, assigned, and unassigned balances, and how many months could you go using up those reserves without having any revenues coming in. So you'll see here you ended just below 7 months. The recommendation is really no less than 5 months, merely a recommendation, but it's the longest time span between settlements coming in. And like, as you see here, all 5 years presented are above that minimum recommendation. So now going into what do your revenues and expenditures look like for all funds. So expenditures did exceed revenues by $667,000 about this year, and fund balance did decrease about $414,000. I'll go over in the next slides by fund, but this is big picture and just kind of looking how it fell. So here are the total revenues by type. So you'll see taxes and intergovernmental are by far your largest revenues coming in. And you'll see here taxes are nicely going up. Each year the levy's increasing a little bit just to keep up with inflation and everything. Some things to note here, you'll see intergovernmental did spike from last year. The main drivers of that was the ARPA money. So now you've received all the ARPA money, but only what has been spent can be recognized as revenue. So the rest is sitting in unearned revenue right now until it's spent. And then highway user tax did go up about $570,000 this year. That fluctuates year to year. Your charges for services did go down some. Recorder fees fell, less cost sharing projects, things of that nature. And then another item to note, investment earnings here, you'll see that it is a loss or a negative here. That is just due to the markets. At 12/31, it's required by GASB 31 that we adjust to market. So any investments. So it's kind of a fictitious adjustment because of course you're keeping those investments long term and they will go back up. And the miscellaneous did go up quite a bit from $400,000 last year to about $1.2 million this year. One main item is the opioid money is in there. It was about $280,000. There was a payoff of the EDA loan as well as additional incentives in human services. And then for expenditures, you'll see the first three categories here are the main expenditures. I'll go over many of these on the next slides by fund. But really, capital outlay went up this year quite a bit from last year, more road projects. You purchased the land for the new government center, also had some vehicle purchases. And then debt service also spiked quite a bit, you'll see. And that was due to the payoff of that refunding bond. So it was defeased in 2022, even though it was issued last year in 21. So the general fund here, you'll see, I mean, for the most part, it's been pretty consistent over the 5 years. 2020 did spike with the CARES money that year. But expenditures did exceed revenues about 1.2 million. After accounting for transfers in and out, it did, fund balance decreased about 1.7 million. And revenues did go up some, taxes went up, but then investment earnings went down. So they, for the most part, offset each other, in addition to those recorder fees going down. And then the main driver of the expenses or expenditures in this fund were new squad cars, and then wages really increased. Road and Bridge Fund, this fund really fluctuates, as you know, with the projects. The money coming in to fund those projects doesn't always align year to year with them. So expenditures did exceed revenues, 3.1 million this year. There was a large transfer in for projects of 2 million, so that helped the fund balance only decrease 1.1 million. And then, like I said, highway user tax did go up about 740,000, so that was a main driver of that revenue going up. For the Human Service Fund, revenues did exceed expenditures in this fund by 1.3 million. And as you can see, revenues have exceeded expenditures for the last 5 years, which is really good to see. IGR is the main driver that went up. And then the expenditures went up due to salaries, and then there were some implementation costs of software, like for PHDoc. And then the final fund here is the miscellaneous fund. So revenues did exceed expenditures here. This one, due to the nature, also fluctuates quite a bit. You did have more intergovernmental revenue in state and federal this year. And then for expenditures, there was the new ballot system for the next election, preparing for that. And then also you did get an AIS grant that you purchased the harvester for Little Rock Lake Township or Association. So that went into this fund as well. So that's why your expenditures went up quite a bit. And then the last chart here is around the county indebtedness. So like I mentioned earlier, that 2014 A bond now was fully paid off. It was defeased in 2022. So that is why it went way down for your liability. GASB 87 was implemented. So that is that second line, the lease liability. So that was copiers, the human service building lease over at Eastgate, as well as postage machines. So if they fell under that standard, they were booked into this lease liability. And also you'll see if you look in the financial statements, you have right to use assets now that relate to those same assets. And then compensated absences, that is your PTO or vacation and sick at 12/31. So the balances that have accumulated, that would be required to be paid out. If you had closed your doors on 12/31, that was your balance, 3.3 or 3.4 million. And then the final line here is OPEB or other post-employment benefits. So that's the actuarial valuation that is done, and that fluctuates based on the assumptions going in.
Commissioner Minsky, you got a comment?
Mr. Chair, can we go back to the compensation part?
Mm-hmm.
The $3.some million, that's a heck of a liability.
Yes. And I mean, of course, not everyone's gonna walk out the door at once.
No,
right?
But you better have it in your account in case it does.
So, Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Pop.
Is that pretty typical of other counties too, that you see?
It is.
It is,
Yes.
huh?
And you know, some, they can fluctuate. You've been pretty consistent. It's kind of growing. But if,
growing, yeah.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, if there's, you know, people that are nearing retirement that have large balances, you'll pay them out and you'll see that drop.
And that's exactly why you have it posted as a liability here.
Yes.
All right.
It is.
That's something that we definitely gotta keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions
Commissioner
before?
Pinsky.
Mr. Chair, on the ARPA, have you heard any other counties getting, we'll just say, slapped by the federal government on how they use their funds and stuff? Just, I personally haven't heard anything, but you.
I have not. You know, just the, you know, findings that I've seen in county audits and things of that nature, but I've not seen the federal government or heard of anything.
Because we hear in district meetings how some counties go about things, and I think we're pretty cautious, to be quite honest with you.
Like to ask for forgiveness and not permission.
Yeah.
But we do look in, you know, as part of those single audits, we look at activities allowed and make sure that what you're spending on it is following in that guidance, or you would see a finding in here.
Okay.
If it did not fall into that, you know, what they had put out.
Or in that vicinity, the clouded area, the gray area, okay.
And I mean, definitely always keep documentation. As
Yeah.
auditors, we love to know, because we want to know what bullet point did you spend it in and why.
Yeah,
So, like you said, you've been conservative. But.
yeah. Maybe we'll talk next year.
Any other questions before I wrap it up? Okay, so as I mentioned, the opioid remediation fund has started receiving revenues, so there's about 280,000 in there. It is presented separately in financial statements now. So you'll see as that gets spent, it's restricted fund balance, so it can only be spent on the various activities allowed by that. There's 6.4 million of ARPA funding left. As I mentioned, GASB 87 was implemented this year. There is one more large standard coming next year, GASB 96. It's around SBITAs, or subscription-based information technology arrangements. So any cloud, any subscription software you're paying for, if you have the right to use someone else's software and it's over a year of a contract, that will also need to be booked similar to leases this year. So you'll have a liability on your books and a right to use asset for that as well. And then the last bullet here is the statement on auditing standards, or SASs. So there are 3 new ones coming out, SAS 143 through 145. We're expecting 145 to take the most time to implement, and that is because we really need to gain an understanding around the IT environment. What controls are in place? Do you have source codes around all that software? Things of that nature to really gain comfort to ensure your IT controls are working properly. So, and that is, like I said, statement on auditing standards, so that's on all audits. That's not just governments. So that is coming for the 23 audit as well. So that is all I had.
Kristen, just as a follow-up to the ARPA, in your opinion, as you look at our ARPA activity, are we a little more on the conservative end of what we're doing there as far as expenditures and programs we're going after?
I would say, I mean, you're definitely within the guidelines. There are not, we haven't seen gray areas.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions for Kristen?
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank her for a great job, always.
And yes, thank you to Jackie and Monty as well. They make our lives a lot easier.
Yes. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Monty.
Thanks, Jackie and Monty. Thank you. All right. Commissioner meeting updates. Who would like to start? And just to keep in mind, please, we do have a ditch authority and a cow coming up. Commissioner Binsky?
Yep.
Yep.
Mine will be quick. Sat on the coalition
Highway
for
22.
you. It was good to get caught up, and asked if I could be on future just as a listener. The radio board, which is not much, and that'll be about it.
Okay. Commissioner Pop?
Sure.
Sorry.
Well, we had library board meeting at the last ones. I guess the biggest take from there was a 6% decrease in health insurance.
Wow.
And I think some of that came from trying to make the employees a little aware that the more you abuse it or use it, the impact goes to your deal. We do have a reopener coming up, and we don't have to do it for health insurance, but we got a mileage dispute on how far they can travel to cross libraries within the 6 regions for that, so we'll have a reopener there. The other one was like, we had park board meeting last Monday night, went a long time, we had a lot of discussion, with what's gonna happen at Bend in the River, and that we have a little discussion on the building that we have to go back to, that they're gonna build. I think at least 2 of us thought the building is way too expensive for what we're getting. I don't think we're getting, what was it, $377,000 or something? $277 for a prefabbed 6-post, 8-post building. I think that's, 2 of us thought that might be overkill, so we're checking into that. And then I had the BEP meeting last Thursday, the board meeting. That all went well. They did a little discussion on what we had with Amanda about coming there. Some concern about how is she gonna get all that done, considering she's got, 4 projects that are moving forward quite fast. And then there was the close of the Sock Rabbits and the Foley business that she actually had said she had some inquiries already about the building in Sauk Rapids right off the bat for a lease, so that's good. So we'll have to have a little more discussion sooner than later about that housing, because it's gonna take, it's gonna take her some time to get up, and can use some USDA rural housing funds to go with what we're gonna do. And she's got a couple companies that are truly intrigued about actually supporting some housing in Benton County, because they're bringing workers in from out of state. So, that'll be, and I think that's about enough as long as we gotta move
All right,
forward.
Commissioner Heinen?
Just with all the cows we had, and then, I spent one day in Wilmer at the Shack Retreat. Actually, that was a very wonderful day.
Okay.
Speaking of public health people.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Schlangen?
I went to the labor market data tool updated for the Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation. And the quarterly business report. Was able to make it to Sandy's retirement. That was fun. And the cows. I think that was it.
All right, thank you. Just to highlight the Fall Township meeting, I believe most of us were there, and
I was not.
we're not, okay.
I was
thank
on
you.
a state.
Of course, our special meeting last week and our cow public safety and ARPA. Just want to again give a public shout out to Sheriff Heck and our Emergency Management Director, Kristen Cheetah, with
Yes.
their grant dollars for the negotiator van, so really appreciate that. Also able to attend the County State Aid Highway 7 open house, which was held here in the boardroom. Commissioner Schlangen was here also. Was a good time to meet with the public, and they had a lot of good questions, and there was a good presentation. I believe they got all their questions answered. And I also was able to attend Sandy Block's retirement party, kind of fun. This room was packed. Really? Say there was 50 people in here, so that was good. Commissioner Pop.
I was just gonna say, yesterday we met, the policy committee chairs met, and we did some dropping of policies that came through the different committees. One is we took the tax abatement stuff and put it all in general government, because we think that's where it belongs. Another one was removed, there was from transportation, there was a staffing request for counties, because, all counties are having issues like we are finding techs and that, and we removed that. And they didn't believe that there was some staffing request or some funding request from public health, and we took that out because they're their own entity, and we believe they should go that on their own. So you'll be seeing it at our district meeting, the priorities that were there, that we limit them down so we can get them voted on and submitted to the next policy committee chairs that will kind of finalize and pick 5.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, one last thing, just a reminder, next board meeting, I'll be in DC with the APO.
Okay.
Right.
St. Cloud APO.
Yep, thank you. Any commissioner comments, concerns? All right, committee of the holes, Monty.
So, Mr. Chair, and I'm proving that this mic actually does work. Two things to actually commit to the record, which have been previously discussed. There's today's committee of the whole with GLT at approximately 11. And also, we rescheduled the Human Services Committee of the whole to October 30th at 8:30. And that will address these subjects: tobacco ordinance revisions, foster care provider assistance, a possible dental clinic, opioid funding, and homeless strategies discussion. All those issues, 8:30, October 30th. Lastly, you're invited to attend an event called Gathering the Village at the St. Cloud Regional Library, October 4th from 8 to noon. It looks like it's sponsored by United Way. I recall I believe I got this invitation though from GSDC. If you're interested in attending, again, that's October 4th.
Tomorrow.
Which is tomorrow, from 8 to noon.
I was planning on attending.
I believe Commissioner Schlangen, you're interested in attending? If you'd like to attend, please let Beth know. That's it.
All right.
Move to approve the cows, Mr. Chair.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
a motion and second to approve the cows as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. We are adjourned at 10:29. We'll take a 2-minute recess and get into the ditch authority.
Sorry about all the techie issues.
Well, it's only where Commissioner Heine